The house was still that night. Ryan had gone upstairs hours ago, retreating to his room with his books and his music, leaving Emma alone in the quiet. The television was off now, the remnants of dinner cleared away, but Emma hadn't moved from the couch. She sat curled up beneath the lamp's soft glow, staring at nothing in particular. Her son's words replayed in her mind, over and over, refusing to fade. You should start dating again. You deserve someone who makes you smile. You've been alone for a long time. Mom, each sentence struck her differently, like soft knocks on a door she had nailed shut years ago. A door she wasn't sure she wanted to open again. Emma leaned back, closing her eyes. For so long she had told herself that love wasn't for her anymore. She had tried it, lived it, and lost it. Daniel had been her first and only great lover, so she thought. When their marriage ended, it felt like the story of romance in her life had ended too. She shifted her focus, poured everything into raising Ryan, telling herself he was enough. And in many ways, he was. He had been her light, her reason to keep going when everything else crumbled. But Ryan was right. She was lonely. The nights were too long. The silence too sharp. The weight of carrying everything alone, every bill, every worry. Every unspoken ache pressed down heavier than she ever admitted. She missed laughter echoing in the kitchen, missed the feeling of a hand brushing against hers, missed having someone to confide in after a hard day, and now to hear her own son say it out loud, it cracked something open inside her that she hadn't realized was still alive. She wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming, quiet and hot. How strange, she thought, that the person who reminded me I still deserve love is the very person I once held in my arms. Rocking to sleep, upstairs she heard the faint creak of Ryan's floorboards. The comfort of his presence above her head was steadying. But she also knew the truth. He was almost grown. Soon he would be gone. Off to college, to his own life, to his own future. And then what would be left for her? The thought sent a chill through her. She realized she had been living in pause, waiting for something she didn't even know she was waiting for. Her life revolved around Ryan, but when he left, what would her world orbit? The clock ticked past midnight. Emma rose from the couch, restless, and wandered into the hallway. She passed the mirror that hung by the stairs and paused. For years, she had avoided really looking at herself, but tonight, she couldn't look away. The woman staring back was tired. Yes, lines etched around her eyes, shadows beneath them. But she was still here, still breathing, still capable of more than survival. She touched the glass, whispering softly, "You're still a woman." The words felt foreign, but they sent a shiver through her. She had thought of herself only as a mother for so long, as though that role had swallowed up everything else. But Ryan's words had reminded her she wasn't finished. She wasn't invisible. She still had a story left to write. The next morning, Emma woke with an unusual energy. She dressed with more care than usual, pulled on a blouse she hadn't worn in years, brushed her hair until it shone, even dabbed a bit of lip color on. It wasn't for anyone in particular, but for herself. To see herself again as more than just a caretaker. When Ryan came downstairs, backpack slung over his shoulder, he stopped mid-step and smiled. "You look different," Emma laughed, though her cheeks warmed. "Different good or different strange?" "Different good," he said quickly, his grin widening. "Really good." Her chest swelled at his words, the simplicity of them striking deep. He wasn't teasing, he meant it. She walked him to the door as she always did, but this time something was different. When he leaned in to hug her goodbye, she held him a little tighter, a little longer. He pulled back, confused for just a moment. But then his eyes softened. "You're gonna be okay, Mom," he said, almost as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. Emma blinked rapidly, her throat thick. "I know." When the door closed behind him and she stood alone in the hallway, she didn't feel the same hollow ache she usually did. Instead, there was something else, a flicker of hope. Fragile but alive. She went about her day, tidying the house, folding laundry, answering emails. But underneath it all, her heart beat differently. Ryan's words had planted a seed, and though it was small, it was growing. Later that week, Emma found herself in front of her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She thought about joining a local book club she had seen advertised, maybe even trying an online cooking class. And though the idea terrified her, she even typed dating sites for single parents into the search bar before quickly closing it with a nervous laugh. She wasn't ready, not yet. But for the first time in years, she could imagine it. She could imagine walking into a cafe and meeting someone's eyes. She could imagine laughing with a man over dinner. She could imagine holding someone's hand again. And it didn't feel impossible anymore. That night, when Ryan came home and they sat at the dinner table, she caught herself smiling more easily. He noticed, of course he always did. "What's with the smile?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Emma shrugged, a soft laugh escaping her. "Just thinking about the future." Ryan grinned, satisfied. "That's good, Mom. That's really good." And in his smile, she saw the truth of it. He wasn't just her son anymore. He was her reminder, her nudge back into life. He was the one who had given her the courage to believe that love wasn't behind her after all. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma didn't feel the familiar heaviness of loneliness pressing down on her. Instead, she felt something lighter, something brighter, something stirring awake inside her. Hope. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, she knew one thing for certain: her story wasn't over. It was only just beginning again. "You've been alone for a long time, Mom." The words echoed in her mind, louder than the creak of the attic floorboards, louder than the rustle of cardboard. She wondered when he had started noticing. Had she been that transparent? Had he seen her sitting at the kitchen table late at night, staring at her tea? Had he overheard her sighing when she thought no one was listening? Her chest tightened again. She hated the idea of her son worrying about her, of him carrying her loneliness on his young shoulders. She wanted to protect him from that. She wanted him to believe she was strong, unshakable, a safe place he could always return to. But maybe he already knew the truth. Maybe he had always known. By the time they climbed down from the attic, the sun had shifted in the sky, casting long shadows across the living room floor. They carried the boxes together, setting them down near the couch. Emma wiped the sweat from her forehead and tried to focus on the simple relief of finishing a task. But her heart was heavy, because even as she laughed with Ryan about the ridiculous old lamp or the time capsule they had found buried under winter coats, a part of her knew things had shifted. He had seen too much. He had pulled back the curtain she had carefully held in place for years, and though he didn't say more, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that Ryan had more to tell her, more to suggest, something she wasn't ready to hear, but something he was already carrying inside. The attic was clean, but Emma felt messier than ever. The day stretched on lazily after the attic cleaning. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the living room in shades of amber and gold. Emma and Ryan had ordered pizza, deciding they'd earned a break after hours of dust and clutter. The empty box now sat on the coffee table, a few stray crusts left behind, while the television flickered with the opening credits of a movie they had both agreed and an old comedy they'd watched a dozen times before. It should have been an ordinary evening, but Emma felt anything but ordinary. Ryan lounged on the couch beside her, his long legs stretched out, a blanket draped casually across his lap. He wasn't the little boy who used to curl against her side anymore. His presence filled the room differently, now steadier, more grown, more aware. Emma sat with her feet tucked under her, trying to relax, but her thoughts wandered. His words from earlier, "You've been alone for a long time," Mom, kept echoing in her head. She sipped from her glass of water, hoping it might quiet the ache in her chest. But it didn't. The movie played, their laughter spilling out here and there as familiar scenes unfolded. Yet, somewhere around the middle, Emma noticed Ryan's attention shift. His laughter grew quieter. He stopped reaching for his soda. Instead, he sat there, watching her more than the screen. "Everything okay?" she asked lightly, forcing a smile. Ryan hesitated, his hand tightening around the edge of the blanket. "Yeah, I just I was thinking. Emma tilted her head, curious. About what? He lowered the volume with the remote, the sudden hush filling the room with an intimacy that made her pulse quicken. She hadn't realized how loud the TV had been until the silence settled. Between them, about you, he said quietly. Emma blinked. Me? Yeah. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried a depth that unsettled her. You've given everything to me, Mom. Always. Every decision you've made, every sacrifice. It's all been for me. Her throat tightened. She wanted to laugh it off, to say, that's what mothers do. But the seriousness in his gaze stopped her. You deserve more, he continued, his tone firm but gentle. You deserve someone who looks after you the way you've looked after me. Someone who makes you smile for no reason. Someone who makes you feel alive again. Emma's heart stuttered. She hadn't expected this awareness, this maturity from her son. It was as though he had peeled back the layers she'd wrapped around herself, exposing the quiet ache she thought she had hidden well. She swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. Ryan, what are you saying? He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm saying you should start dating again. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through every corner of Emma's heart. She stared at him, stunned, her breath caught in her throat. Dating? She repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. Ryan, why not? He interrupted softly. You're still young. You're beautiful. And you're kind, Mom. You've got so much love to give. You shouldn't spend your whole life alone just because things didn't work out with Dad. Emma froze. No one had called her beautiful in years, not in a way that felt sincere. And hearing it from her son, of all people, left her shaken. She wanted to protest, to tell him she was fine, that she didn't need anyone. But deep down, she knew the truth. The nights were long. The silence was heavy. And yes, she had built her world around Ryan. But there was a part of her that still longed for companionship, for warmth, for someone to hold her hand when life felt too much. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by her own emotions. It's not that simple, she whispered. Ryan leaned back, his expression softening, but his voice still steady. I know it's not simple, but you deserve it. And I don't want you to wait until I'm gone to figure that out. I want you to be happy now. The weight of his words crushed her and lifted her at the same time. She glanced back at him, studying the boy who was no longer a boy. The young man who saw her more clearly than she had seen herself in years. Ryan, she said, her voice trembling, you shouldn't have to worry about me. That's not your job. His jaw tightened. But I do worry about you. Because you're my mom. Because I love you. And because I can see how lonely you are, even when you try to hide it. Her breath caught again, and this time, she couldn't stop the tears from slipping down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions. She felt his hand on her shoulder, warm, steady, grounding. Hey, he murmured, his thumb brushing gently against her arm. It's okay. I didn't mean to upset you. Emma shook her head, her voice breaking. You didn't upset me. You just surprised me. No one's ever said that to me before. Not like this. They sat there in silence for a while, the muted TV flickering in the background. Emma's heart pounded, not just from his words, but from the tenderness in his tone, the sincerity in his eyes. She realized something in that moment. Ryan wasn't just giving her permission to live again. He was pushing her to step into a life she had abandoned. A life she had convinced herself she no longer deserved. And though part of her wanted to resist, another part, a quieter, braver part, was awakening. For the first time in years, Emma felt the faint spark of possibility. The idea that maybe her story wasn't finished yet. That maybe, just maybe, love could find her again. Ryan turned the volume back up eventually, pretending to refocus on the movie. But Emma barely saw the screen. Her mind was spinning, her heart full, her soul shaken in the best and scariest way. What he had said wasn't just a suggestion. It was a reminder, and it had changed everything. Emma woke up earlier than usual that Friday morning. The September sunlight was pouring gently through the blinds, warming her bedroom with a soft golden glow. Normally, she would have been rushing by, now dressing in a hurry, sipping her coffee too fast and gathering her things for the office. But today was different. She had taken a day off. At least, that's what she told herself. She stretched under the covers, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. It struck her how rare this silence was. Years ago, when Ryan was little, the mornings were filled with his chatter. He would run into her room, jumping onto the bed with a stuffed toy in hand, begging for pancakes or cartoons. Now at 17, Ryan's mornings started later, quieter, often with headphones in his ears or his face buried in a phone screen. Emma sighed and rolled out of bed, her bare feet meeting the cool wooden floor. She wrapped herself in her robe and headed downstairs, the familiar creak of the staircase greeting her like an old companion. She had promised herself this day off would be productive laundry, cleaning, maybe even tackling the clutter in the attic. But deep down, she knew there was another reason she had stayed home. She wanted to be close to her son. Lately, Ryan had been slipping further into his own world, college applications, part-time jobs, friends she barely knew. Emma felt him drifting, not out of love, but out of necessity. He was becoming a man, and she was proud of him. But pride didn't erase the ache in her heart, the longing for the little boy who used to call her his best friend. She busied herself in the kitchen, pulling out flour, eggs, and milk. Pancakes. It had been years since she'd made them. But she remembered how his eyes used to light up when he saw a stack waiting on the table. She whisked the batter slowly, her mind wandering. Cooking gave her space to think about the years that had passed, about the marriage that had ended, about the quiet sacrifices she had made along the way. The divorce had been civil, but it left wounds that Emma had learned to hide. Ryan's father, Daniel, had moved on quickly, remarrying a woman Emma had never met but often heard about from Ryan. At first, Emma had worried Ryan would choose his father's world over hers. But he hadn't. He had stayed close, choosing to live with her, giving her something to hold on to in the nights that felt too empty. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen. She set the table carefully, 2 plates, 2 glasses of orange juice, small vase with a single daisy she had picked from the yard. It felt almost ceremonial, like she was preparing for something more than breakfast. Upstairs, she heard the shuffle of footsteps. Moments later, Ryan appeared at the doorway, his hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Morning, sweetheart," Emma replied, her voice softer than she intended. "Sit down. I made pancakes." He blinked in surprise, then smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. "Pancakes? You haven't made those in forever." Emma's heart swelled. "I thought you might like them. Just like old times." As he sat, she noticed how tall he had grown, how his shoulders had broadened, how his voice carried a weight that wasn't there before. For a brief moment, she saw his father's shadow in him, the same jawline, the same quiet way of carrying himself. But unlike Daniel, Ryan's presence felt gentle, steady. They ate in comfortable silence at first, the only sounds being the clink of forks against plates. But Emma kept stealing glances at him. She wanted to memorize this moment, the sunlight catching in his brown hair, the way he chewed thoughtfully, the way he looked up at her with a grin when he noticed her staring. "What?" he asked, laughing lightly. "Nothing," she said quickly, shaking her head. "You're just growing up too fast," he smirked. "That's what happens, Mom." Her chest tightened. She didn't want to admit how much she missed the little boy who used to climb into her lap. She didn't want to admit how much she feared the day he would leave for college, how empty the house would feel without him. The rest of the morning passed in little moments, washing dishes together, teasing each other about who had eaten more pancakes, and deciding to tackle the attic since the day stretched before them without plans. Emma felt something inside her she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Yet even in the calm, there was an undercurrent she couldn't name. Something about the way Ryan looked at her sometimes, too aware, too perceptive, made her uneasy. Not in a bad way, but in a way that stirred questions she wasn't ready to ask. By noon, as they carried boxes down from the attic, Emma realized something she hadn't dared to admit out loud. Ryan wasn't just her son anymore. He was becoming a mankind protective and quietly observant. And though she didn't know it yet, by the end of that day, he would say something that would leave her heart racing and her thoughts spiraling, in ways she could never have imagined. The attic had always been a world of its own. Dust floated in the shafts of light that streamed through the small window, giving the space a hazy, almost dreamlike quality. Old cardboard boxes lined the wooden beams, some collapsing under their own weight. Others marked with faded handwriting Emma barely recognized. Ryan sneezed, waving a hand through the air. "Wow, Mom! When was the last time anyone came up here?" Emma chuckled softly, brushing a cobweb from her sleeve. "Probably before you were born. This house has a way of holding on to things." She said it lightly, but in her chest the words felt heavier. The attic wasn't just cluttered with forgotten furniture and broken toys, it was cluttered with memories. Memories she hadn't faced in years. They started opening boxes together, side by side. Ryan pulled out an old set of Legos, laughing as he recognized the spaceship they had once built together. Emma smiled, remembering how he used to spend hours on the floor with her, insisting she'll help him piece together tiny bricks even after her long days at work. "I can't believe you kept all this," Ryan said, shaking his head with a grin. "Of course I did," Emma replied. "Every little piece of you. I wanted to hold on to it." Her voice caught slightly and she turned away. Pretending to dust off another box, they moved on photo albums, old school projects, faded Christmas ornaments. The air grew warmer, heavier, as the sun climbed higher outside, then tucked in the corner under a stack of blankets. Emma spotted something that made her pause. A white garment bag. Her stomach tightened before she even unzipped it. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she drew the zipper down and revealed what lay inside. Her wedding dress. The satin was yellowed with age, but the delicate lace along the sleeves still held a kind of fragile beauty. She ran her hand along the fabric, her fingers trembling. For a moment, she was transported back in time, back to the day she walked down the aisle. Back when she believed in forever. Ryan's voice broke the silence. "You still have that?" Emma turned, startled by the softness in his tone. He wasn't teasing. He was watching her with a seriousness that made her heart ache. "Yes," she whispered. "I guess. Some memories are hard to throw away." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Holding that dress was like holding a ghost. She could almost feel Daniel's hand in hers, hear the promises they once exchanged. Promises that had dissolved like mist in the morning sun. Ryan stepped closer, studying her face. "Do you ever miss it? Not the dress, I mean. The life you had." The question landed like a weight in her chest. Emma wanted to answer quickly, brush it off with a simple no or a joking sometimes, but her throat tightened. And for once, she couldn't hide. "I miss the feeling," she admitted after a long pause. "Not him, not what we had, but the idea of belonging somewhere, having someone to come home to, being seen." Her voice cracked on the last words, and she quickly turned away, pretending to fold the dress back into the bag. Ryan didn't say anything right away, but Emma could feel his eyes on her, not with pity, but with a kind of fierce protectiveness she hadn't expected. "You've been alone for a long time." "Mom," he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. The truth of it pierced her. She wanted to argue, to insist that she wasn't lonely, that she had Ryan, that her life was full enough. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down she knew he was right. Yes, she had filled her days with work, with caring for him, with keeping the house running. But the nights were long. The bed was cold. And in the stillness, when the world was quiet, she often felt the ache of being unseen, untouched, unchosen. She swallowed hard, forcing a smile as she closed the garment bag and tucked it back under the blankets. "Come on," she said lightly, trying to shake off the heaviness. "Let's keep going. There's still so much junk to sort through." Ryan didn't push her, but the weight of his observation lingered in the air, pressing against her skin like humidity as they worked. Emma caught him glancing at her from time to time. His eyes were thoughtful, almost too mature for his age. He wasn't just looking at her as a son looks at his mother. He was looking at her as someone who saw her, really saw her. The tired lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she sometimes drifted off into silence, the way her laughter didn't always reach her heart. Emma tried to busy herself with another box, pulling out an old lamp that didn't work anymore. But her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about what Ryan had said.